more and more voices are coming out and declaring that what Israel is doing in Gaza is unjustified. Many of Israel's defenders, on the other hand, are declaring that the war is definitely justified. Some might even adopt a more nuanced look, stating that the war is justified, but that the specific way in which Israel wages this war is unjustified. Let's investigate, shall we? First, let's take a look at the anti-Israeli side. The main claim is that Israel is intentionally attacking the Gaza Strip in order to maximize civilian casualties. Or that, at the very least, Israel is trying to force Palestinians out of Gaza and into Egypt. The opponents of Israel's actions point out that these conditions would qualify as ethnic cleansing, literally, because you take a certain ethnic group and you, cleanse a particular area of it. Some might even claim that the fact that Israel has inflicted way more casualties in Gaza than the casualties that Hamas inflicted on Israel is a sign that the response is disproportionate. In addition, they claim that Israel's treatment of Gaza is collective punishment. Some might claim that Israel should find ways to better target only Hamas. Some would go even further in justifying Hamas, saying that its assault on Israel on October the 7th was merely done in self-defense, and that the Israeli claims of massacres against civilians are exaggerated. The Israeli side would claim that its actions in Gaza are justified. They would cite that Hamas is a terror organization that vows to destroy it and to kill Jews. Israel would also claim that Hamas intentionally acts from within populated areas and that the IDF tries to avoid harm to civilians. Even though many Israelis wonder how many of these Palestinian civilians would murder them if they only had the chance. It might also be worthwhile to note that Israel is aware that much of its international support is dependent on keeping the civilian casualties as low as possible, so they might have a case there. And it could be said that Hamas actually has a strategic interest in causing as much death as possible to its own civilian population. In addition, those on the Israeli side would claim that the State of Israel has responsibility towards its citizens and not towards the people of Gaza, and thus any discussion about proportionality is stupid. Anti-Israelis would counter by saying that Israel is occupying Gaza and does have responsibility for its people, while Israel would say that it left Gaza in 2005 and does not occupy it. Anyway, some might claim that there is a difference between targeting civilians deliberately, like Hamas did, and between hurting them as collateral damage. I mean, Israel technically could turn the whole of Gaza into rubble, including its civilians, if it only wanted to. A deliberate Israeli targeting of civilians would probably be way more deadly than what we have been seeing in Gaza. In addition, Israel would claim that its war in Gaza is very justified in the sense that it is a just retaliation to the Hamas attack on October the 7th that has shaken Israel and caused many in it to believe that they cannot live side by side with Hamas and that it must be annihilated, or at the very least, kicked from its borders. But having said that, I want to actually make it even more interesting. I want to pose this question. Would Israel be justified in initiating the war in Gaza before the events of October the 7th? I know, it's a stupid question, but in reality, what we believe about the answer actually reveals a lot. I assume that most of the people who justify Israel's actions today would not justify them to the same extent if Israel was to act before the events of the 7th of October. Because before the events, it seemed to many people like Hamas could be counted on to mostly act as a rational player, maybe even as a player that can be contained and lived side by side with, in a sort of tense relationship. But once the October 7th attacks took place, Hamas has revealed that it truly intends on killing and harming Israelis as much as possible, so Israel was more justified in acting. But this belief that most of us hold teaches us something about ourselves, and that is that most of us think like deontologists, meaning that when we judge something to be right or wrong, we think about intention more than we think about results. Here's an example. Let's say a person tried to make me happy by buying me ice cream, but he didn't know that I absolutely hate ice cream. and that just looking at it makes me sick. If we analyze the situation, we will realize that this person has caused more harm than good by getting me ice cream. He made me sick, and he spent his own money, but his intentions were good, and thus almost none of us would say that he did something wrong. Now, let's take another example. Let's say a person tried to make me sad, so he tried to poison my dog, but alas, the poison ended up only killing the termites that I had in my garden that were bothering me so much. So that person ended up bringing to good results because he solved my termite problem. But still, almost none of us would say that he acted well. To us, that person was evil. So now that we are clear about how most of us value intentions more than we value results, why does it matter to the Israel-Gaza situation? Because most of the current conflict's justification is all about intentions. Many on the pro-Palestinian side are saying that Israel has caused more damage in Gaza than Hamas has caused in Israel, and is thus in the wrong. However, it is difficult to compare the intentions of the two sides. Hamas has entered Israel with the intent of causing as much damage as it could to as many civilians as it could, while Israel has entered Gaza with the intent of stabilizing the situation in a way that won't threaten it again in the future, and Israel also intends to minimize civilian casualties, since any such casualty could erode its international support. Many supporters of the Palestinians, as we've said, try to make a case in which Israel has killed more Palestinians than Hamas has killed Israelis. However, as we've said, this is ignoring intent. And if we are to go by the logic that ignores intent, then we must also conclude that it doesn't matter whether Israel attacked before or after the events of October the 7th, since it's not the intent that matters, but only the end result. For these people, if Israel attacked Gaza first, and only then Hamas did the October the 7th attacks, then there would be no moral difference in the situation. A rather weird conclusion, most would think. Many supporters of the Palestinians recognize the weakness of this position, so they attempt to show that Israel intends on inflicting as much damage as possible on civilians in Gaza. They do this by quoting some Israeli politicians' bad statements. However, it's hard to state that seriously. The Palestinian population has been under Israeli military control since 1967, and it has grown substantially since then. I am guessing that it is not what an intentional targeting of civilians looks like. So what do these people do? They try to show intent by the results. They will try to claim that since Palestinians are being harmed, then that must mean that Israel intends on annihilating them. But when they do that, they claim that Israel intends to harm civilians based on the fact that civilians are being harmed. So to do that, they have to go back to the argument that more Palestinians are dying than Israelis, so that you can lump more responsibility on the Israelis. And then, well, they have to go back to the loop that ignores intent and goes by results only. And even then, the argument wouldn't be so strong, since the Palestinian population is not decreasing in a significant manner in the long run. So you might as well point at these results. And then again, if you are chiefly concerned with comparing body counts and ignoring intentions, do you also believe that all bodies are equal? I'll explain. Should Israel go by body count, even if they were to ignore intent? Should Israel see over 1,000 of its citizens to be worth just over 1,000 of its enemies? Or should Israel prioritize its own people? I believe that this is also something to take into account. If you are chiefly concerned with comparing body counts and proportion, meaning results and not intent, then you must also take into account that some countries might value their own citizens more than they value others. So is Israel justified in attacking Gaza? I will leave that judgment up to you.